Hey everyone, Jake here from wealthycorner.com. I help millennials in the US and Canada reach financial freedom. Freedom from money stress and freedom to use their time and energy in the best possible way to maximize fulfillment in life because it is short. So let's dig into this. This calculator I built to give you an idea of the unrecoverable cost of home ownership, which is the money spent when you own a home that you can never get back. And this can be compared to rent, which is obviously an unrecoverable cost because you can't take the rent price back once you pay it to the landlord. So it's useful for anyone pondering this decision or anyone who owns a home and wants to truly understand what the cost of ownership is, because that's not talked about very much. And there's a lot of cultural pressure and pressure from real estate agents to buy a home. So let's dig into the numbers. So rent price, you put that in for comparison purposes. Use the rent price in your area if you're not currently renting. The home value, so this is the market value of the home, what your house could sell for or what you would buy a house for today. Home equity, so this is the difference between the market value of the home and the debt and what you owe on the home. So if you sell the house today and you pay down the mortgage, whatever you have left, that's your home equity. Your mortgage rate, so that's the cost of taking out the money that you have debt on the home. So that's actually you're renting money from the bank. Property tax rate, you can find that's unique to your municipality. You could probably find that on your municipality's website or give them a ring. Home maintenance amount, I used a conservative 1% of the house value per year. The research I've done says it varies between 1% and 3% per year. So something you got to look at for your specific house type to get better accuracy there. I left it on the conservative end, favoring home ownership actually. Home maintenance costs. So this chart here breaks down your total costs based on your home value. So here we got house maintenance at $5,000 a year, property tax at $5,000 a year. Cost of debt. So I'll explain this one. This is the interest that you pay on the debt based on your interest rate of 2.7% in this case and the amount of mortgage debt. All right, so the opportunity cost of home equity. What is this? So this is non-intuitive and it hurt my brain a little bit when I first started to understand this concept that when you put money in anything, in this case in the house, so this is the money you have tied up in the house, it's money that you can't use for higher returns elsewhere. And in this case, I'm using the global equity market, the global stock market, which achieves a 4% higher return on average over the last 100 plus years relative to real estate. So real estate appreciation, as you can see over here, tends to beat inflation by 1.3% a year, while global equities, the global stock market, tends to beat inflation by 5.3% a year. That's what it's done throughout history, and that's because equities have a higher risk associated with them. And you can see all this historical data at the link here, the 2021 Credit Suisse Global Investment Returns Yearbook, a great source that I think anyone who's investing should read. And so this means that the money you're tying up in the equity of the house, even if you're mortgage free, so say a $500,000 house that's mortgage free, that's $500,000 that you can't invest in global equities. So you're missing out on those higher returns, which is an opportunity cost. That's an economics 101 concept, and it is a real cost that needs to be accounted for. So in the rent versus buy evaluation, this evaluation only works when if you're renting, you have to put the difference in the global equity market and do that over the long term to achieve the higher returns associated with global equities over time. Okay, so what does this all mean? Well, you add all these up, you have a total unrecoverable monthly cost of $2,000 a month for a $500,000 house. So if you can rent for less than $2,000 a month, it makes more sense for your long-term wealth to rent, right? So here, if I put the rent price, this says it's a buy because rent is $3,000, and it makes more sense to obviously buy because the unrecoverable cost of home ownership is less than the $3,000 rent per month. If the rent per month in the area is $2,000, and let's say we use an Ontario number for the average house price of $900,000, then it makes more sense to rent until the rent price exceeds $3,720 per month, which is a lot. This is a nice comparison, strictly with the numbers, no opinions, of renting versus buying by comparing the unrecoverable cost of home ownership to the unrecoverable cost of renting. Now, there's some other financial caveats that I did not throw in, so I'll break those down into financial factors favoring home ownership and financial factors favoring renting. So, in favor of home ownership, investment returns are taxed, which will lower the opportunity cost of equity because your after-tax returns will be lower. So this 7.3% after-tax return might actually be only 5% after tax, because if you're taxed on those capital gains and dividends, you're not going to see as much after tax, whereas the appreciation on the residence is tax free. A higher allocation of bonds will reduce your returns relative to a 100% equity portfolio. Factors favoring renting. So there's realtor fees and land transfer tax. These tilt the numbers in favor of renting. Frequent moves. If you move frequently, then you impose yourself to the risk associated with house volatility in the housing price, especially because you're leveraged. That really increases your risks should the housing market go down, which it actually does from time to time, especially if you look through history, not just the 2008 crash in the States, but also the Japanese real estate market crashing and all the localized bubbles that have occurred throughout the world in real estate. So don't think you are safe and that real estate just always goes up. That's not what history tells us. Sometimes in favor of renting, some bidding wars like we currently have in today's environment make it very stressful to buy. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get. You can't get a home inspection done, and you risk buying a disaster, quite frankly. So let's move on to some behavioral considerations of home ownership. A mortgage forces you to save. This whole numerical approach to maximize long-term wealth in this rent versus buy decision, that all depends on you investing the difference when you're renting. If you don't have the discipline to do that, it won't work. And a mortgage forces you to save. Custom home design and customizing your environment where you live to suit your needs is tough to do when you're renting. So that's another factor in favor of home ownership. When you own a home, you're not going to get evicted. So that's pretty good. Factors favoring renting. So there's no stress in dealing with home maintenance and hiring people. There's flexibility to move, which is great. And I didn't talk about this, but the money that you have to stash away in an emergency fund equivalent for house maintenance is additional money that you can't invest in global equity. So it also has an opportunity cost. Biases. So there's a cultural pressure and a group of real estate agents advocating for home ownership. This imposes a bias in favor of home ownership. The opportunity cost that I've discussed of equity in the home is non-intuitive. And because it's non-intuitive, it's kind of hidden and you're less likely to account for it. I hope you like this video. I hope it helps you either as a homeowner better understand your total unrecoverable costs, or when you are trying to make the rent versus buy decision, that it allows you to compare the numbers to make the best decision, while also accounting for the biases and your own behavioral preferences that aren't reflected in the numbers.